Have you ever wondered how the poorest rich people lived during the Gilded Age? Well, one family barely scraped by to keep up appearances, building a bargain castle in the Berkshires. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1838, Robert Warden Patterson was born in Currymere, a small weaving town in Scotland. When Robert was 4, the family sailed for Canada and settled as pioneer farmers in rural Ontario. Robert's first money is said to have come out of the ground from an early oil discovery in Canada. The real fortune, however, came in New York, where he prospered in naval stores, the old trade name for the products of the pine tree, selling the wood rosin and turpentine that went into the era's soaps, varnishes, paints, and linoleum. It was about as unglamorous as Gilded Age money could get, but it worked. By the early 1890s, Patterson was a rich man, moving in the city's wealthiest circles, and in 1893 he quietly wed Marie-Louise Fay, a family friend 20 years his junior. The society pages were stunned because Marie-Louise was the daughter of Joseph Fay, a French immigrant whose Sag Harbor factory had made him the largest watch case and silverware manufacturer in the country, and a grand wedding had been expected. In the late 1890s, their friend, John Sloan of the W&J Sloan furniture fortune, introduced them to Lenox, and after a summer stay in 1900, the Pattersons went shopping for a hilltop. They bought roughly 130 acres next door to the Sloans' Wyndhurst, an old hilltop farm called Highlawn. To design the new house, Patterson summoned Robert Henderson Robertson, a New York society architect whose portfolio ran from Vanderbilt family commissions and the great barns of Shelburne Farms to some of Manhattan's earliest steel skyscrapers. A resort periodical of the day reported that Robertson arrived in the Berkshires, sketched a rough design on the back of an envelope, and the house was built just as he drew it. Patterson's brief was simple and immodest. He wanted a castle, feudal in feeling, bristling with towers, turrets, and gargoyles. What actually rose on the hill was less a Scottish fortress than an Elizabethan Tudor manor of brick and stone, though the towers, turrets, and gargoyles all made the final cut. The New York Tribune guessed the place would cost $300,000, and the New York Times guessed $500,000, and both were wildly wrong because the construction bill came to only $135,000. Getting there took a small army, with more than 1,000 workers on the job at the peak, over 300 of them masons, and the house stood finished by August 1902, within 2 years of breaking ground. Visitors passed between massive stone gate pillars and climbed a long, winding gravel drive to the summit, where the house presided over terraced lawns and gardens and looked out across Laurel Lake to the Berkshire Hills. Guests arrived beneath a porte cochere, stepped through an arched doorway into a window-lined entrance hall, and emerged in the Great Hall, the baronial heart of the house. Here was mahogany paneling, an ornamental plaster ceiling, a grand staircase, and a massive stone fireplace, with mounted trophy heads gazing down on new arrivals. Leaded stained glass windows carried Robert Patterson's own coat of arms, a splendid touch for a postmaster's son from rural Ontario. The house's showpiece instrument was a large pipe organ, the ultimate status symbol for any Gilded Age mansion with musical ambitions. A photograph from 1903 survives of Robert and Marie-Louise seated together at its console, the turpentine merchant and the watchcase heiress at the keys of their brand new castle. Off the Great Hall lay the music room, the brightest room in the house, washed in light from its tall windows. This is where the Pattersons formally unveiled Blantyre to Lenox society at a garden party in September 1904, receiving their guests here before sending them out through the gardens while an orchestra played from the south corner of the terrace. Every account of the Pattersons' entertaining agrees that each party was more lavish than the last, with musicians brought up from New York for the occasion. On the other side of the hall, through a corridor, waited the dining room, paneled floor to ceiling in dark wood and fitted with a built-in buffet. Like nearly everything at Blantyre, its furnishings came from England, and much of the household's furniture was actually copied from pieces at Hatfield House. Then there was the collection, because the Pattersons collected with the cheerful energy of new money. Marie-Louise bought paintings, and canvases credited to Corot, Turner, and Constable hung at Blantyre, while Robert pursued sculpture and porcelain. The furnishings and art together cost $165,000, which means the Pattersons spent more filling the house than they had spent building it. At the 1904 unveiling, the ground floor art gallery was thrown open for inspection along with every other room, and within 2 years, the collection had outgrown even that, so by 1906, the couple added an entire new wing just to hold it. When Robert died, the Boston papers remembered Blantyre as much for its notable art collection as for the man who had built it. The tour ended in the conservatory, a long tunnel of a room walled in glass at the far side of the house. That is exactly where the 1904 housewarming wound up, with guests ushered through the gardens and across the full width of the house into the light. Robert Patterson passed away at his New York home in October of 1917 at 78 years old, leaving an estate of about $1 million. It was real money, though modest for Berkshire cottage standards, for the Pattersons had always been the newest and least deep-pocketed members of the summer colony. Marie Louise inherited $490,000 along with the New York house and Blantyre outright, and the rest was divided among his sons and siblings. She held on for 8 more summers, then sold Blantyre in 1925 for just $25,000, less than a tenth of what she and Robert had poured into it, and she passed away in 1938. What followed was one of the strangest afterlives of any Berkshire cottage. A Florida promoter and a former New York congressman took turns trying to merge Blantyre with the neighboring estates of Windhurst, Coldbrook, and Pinecroft into an ambitious resort called the Berkshire Hunting Country Club, with the mansion serving as a clubhouse for a new golf course. The club advertised its second season in August 1929, and the stock market crashed that October, which tells you roughly how the story went. By 1933, the club was drowning in lawsuits and debt, and in 1938, the house passed to the film pioneer D.W. Griffith, who dreamed of turning it into a movie studio, but never did. The Lenox National Bank ended up holding the property, and in 1944, Henry and Babette Mendez bought it and opened it as an inn for the Tanglewood crowd. The 1970s were brutal to the house, and by the end of that decade, Blantyre sat abandoned. Salvation arrived in 1980 when Jack and Jane Fitzpatrick of the Red Lion Inn and Country Curtains bought the derelict estate for their daughter, Anne Fitzpatrick Brown, who restored it and reopened it in 1981 as a country house hotel that earned 5 stars from Forbes. Anne ran Blantyre until her passing in 2016, and the next year it sold to a Silicon Valley investor who relaunched it before closing the house in late 2021 for a far bigger renovation. Since then, it has changed hands twice more, selling for $15 million in 2021 to a preservation-minded developer, working with the designer Ken Folk, and for $14 million in 2024 to Chicago's Topography Hospitality, which plans to finish the long-stalled overhaul and reopen the Pattersons' castle at last. The Pattersons endowed no hospitals, built no libraries, and left their name on no institutions, so this house is the whole of their monument. More than 120 years on, it still holds the hilltop, waiting once again for the party to start. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think about Blantyre? Let me know down below in the comments section, and while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.